Hello and welcome to episode 114 of MMO Weekly, presented as always by Chitty's Cheesesteaks. I'm your host, Sal Manzo, joined by Mathias Altman-Kurosaki. Mathias, as we talk right now, the Mets have lost 13 of the last 15 games. If you could see it in my face, it hasn't been great. A lot of blown leads late, not a lot of length in their starters. Francisco Lindor has kind of been killing the Mets on both sides of the ball. The bullpen's taxed. Ryan Helsley seems to not be the guy that they thought they were trading for. And they have a half-game lead on the Cincinnati Reds in the wild cards as we stand right now. So hasn't been going great in Mets land since we spoke last around the trade deadline. Obviously, we both thought that they did a great job. Soto and Rogers seem to be doing their jobs. We talked a little bit before off air. But Ryan Helsley has just not been very good for the Mets. Not been very good for the Mets, and as a result, among other things, the Mets just seem to be in a little bit of a downward tailspin at the moment. So, just want to get your thoughts on all the losing going on here.
Yeah, truly, this is a disaster from top to bottom, really. And the thing is that the frustrating thing to me is that a lot of these games they're losing have been very winnable. They've lost 13 of 15, and in 9 of those games, they've had a lead at some point. And 7 of those losses have been by 1 run. Like these are games that, they're doing things on the margins to lose games. It seems like, it feels like they're like just rotating, like who's going to find a way to lose today's game this time. It's a lot of times it's been the starting pitcher, but then everyone was complaining about the offense for a while, and the offense has actually perked up a little bit in recent days. But sometimes the lineup doesn't show up, or the bullpen lets a game go late. Because you look at the offense this month, Alonso has an OPS over 1,200. Soto has reached base in every game this month. Lindor, for as much as he struggled, went 6 for 14 against Atlanta. But I mean, Helsley had his 3rd straight rough outing. The starting pitching, Kodai Senga was the first player to go even 5 innings in over a week. They still haven't won a game since in which they've trailed after 8 innings too, which, last year and even early this season, they would just find ways to win games. And they're finding ways to lose games right now. And really, I don't know what can save them right now. I want to say they can make the playoffs, but they only have a half-game lead now. This is a team that had aspirations of going to the World Series this year, and right now we're facing the real possibility they won't even be in the playoffs.
It feels like it's the exact opposite of last year's team, right? They're getting no length from their starters. You mentioned Senga, first pitcher to pitch into the 5th inning in like a week. But outside of that, he's the first pitcher to pitch into the 6th outside of David Peterson. I don't know how long. Frankie Montas is in the bullpen now. That's a signing. I'm sure that at this point, Stearns wish he could get back, especially with 2 years. He's been horrible. And it doesn't feel like this team feels like they're in it. Kind of like you said, it almost feels like at this point now they're waiting to find ways to lose games. And obviously losing 13 of your last 15, it seems kind of evident that is happening. The offense has perked up, like you mentioned, but in general, it just has not been consistent top to bottom. You have at times, you have the bottom of the lineup going, and then at other times the top 4 don't really do much. Soto, Pete hit the record-breaking home run, which is awesome for the franchise. But in general, like you said, the team that has World Series aspirations gave out the biggest contract in North American sports, is on the cusp of, not making the playoffs at all, and, could be what feels like a horrible tailspin into the end of the season here. So I understand what you're saying. I don't know what can fix it. Hopefully guys like McLean, who's going to make Nolan McLean is going to make his first start Saturday. And then someone like Brandon Sproat eventually will probably be up here, I would think, because someone like Clay Holmes is not going to be pitching in the starting rotation much longer. Maybe some injection of some youth here on the pitching side. But, if the things keep going the way they're going, especially where the bullpen looks as far as just being so taxed because the starters don't give them any length, I just don't know how they can kind of make any sort of push at this point.
Yeah, and really, it's my concern. I feel like every year where a team makes the playoffs because their bullpen's so great. But it's, relying on your bullpen to get you all the way to the World Series is not a sustainable way of winning. And right now it feels like, that's what they've had to do, unfortunately. And, we talk about the guys they got at the deadline, Soto, Rogers, Helsley. I mean, and, you have Edwin Diaz, who's barely pitched lately. It's the thing is that you can't use that shiny bullpen you have if you don't get them the ball with the lead. That's the thing is that, we've been dogging on Helsley right now, but it felt like Helsley for a while, like, that first week or so he was on the team, barely got to pitch with the lead. He came in his first game, he came in with a tie game. He came with the tie game again against Cleveland. He came in when they were trailing against Cleveland. He came in when I believe they were trailing against the Brewers. He came in with a 1-run lead against the Brewers again. And then today, again, he came with a 1-run lead. But you're looking at their appearances in a lot of these games, they're not winning when they're bringing the guy in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Diaz gave up his first earned run since April in Milwaukee the other day. Again, it's like, when's the last time he had a save opportunity? I believe his last save opportunity was the last game of the series in San Francisco.
Wow.
So
2 weeks ago. Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly. So at this point, I mean, the thing is, you've seen the flashes of greatness this year. They were 45-24 at one point, and heck, if you want to talk about July, I mean, they won 7 games in a row. They won 14 of their first 21 games in July. But since that 14-7 stretch, they've gone 2-13. And before July started, they had a 3-14 stretch. So those are 2 horrendous stretches. But they've also had stretches where they've looked really good, like a team that could go to the World Series or win the World Series. So, I mean, if they're really serious about this, they do have another one of those hot streaks in them. And I really do believe that this team is talented enough to go on one of those runs, but they haven't really given the fans a lot to believe in these last few weeks.
Yeah, no, I mean, like you said, there's not a lot to believe at this point, just with how this tailspin has gone. I worry about the starting pitching. That's kind of what I keep going back to. I know the lineup has been inconsistent, which you don't like. Lindor, like you said, in this series has looked a lot better than he has the last few weeks because, he's someone that also was costing the Mets some games, not only, not hitting, but also on the defensive side of the ball. But I just don't know how at this point they can steady a ship where they're getting zero length from their starters, and at this point are going to have to probably use August and September of using a couple of guys with no major league experience as far as bringing up these guys like McLean and at some point Sprout to make starts here, because Clay Holmes obviously has hit a wall. I don't know if you want to use an opener or something like that, but he's somebody who can't start anymore. He's going to have to go in the bullpen. Maybe that'll help ease things as far as with Helsley and things like that, because now it's just shortened the game a little more in theory. But I just don't know how, unless they kind of, just like you said, can get on a run, get on a hot streak and right the ship. I just don't know where the course correction is going to happen, because they don't have any real stoppers right now in the starting rotation.
And also you look at their schedule and there aren't really a lot of soft spots, I would say. You look at the rest of the schedule, you're looking at 3 games against the Mariners this weekend where you're going to be facing Luis Castillo, George Kirby, and Brian Wu. 3 very good pitchers. And then, all right, 3 in Washington, 3 in Atlanta. In theory, those are 6 games against sub-500 teams, but they are 3-7 against the Braves for some reason this year. It feels like, no matter who is on the Braves roster, they just terrorize the Mets. And then, the Phillies come to town. The Phillies and the Marlins come to town. The toughest stretch of the year is the beginning of September. They have a 10-game road trip against the Tigers, Reds, and Phillies. And those 10 games could make or break the season.
Sure.
So you have to take advantage of those games against Washington, Atlanta. And I know the Marlins have been playing better, but you have to take advantage of those 4 games against the Marlins too, and try to find a way to win a couple of these games against the Phillies and Mariners. So basically, the rest of the month, I think they have to win at least 8 of these 12 games to even stay within striking distance of A, the division, and B, keeping that playoff spot.
Yeah, and it goes back to the fact that it doesn't feel like they have that in them to go on a run, to win 8 out. Because again, you have guys like Mania that's back, but he's still been good when he's pitched, but you're not getting a lot of length out of him because essentially, it's whatever you want to call it.
He's hit a wall in each of his last couple outings.
Yeah, and he hasn't pitched, so it's kind of a lost year for him. Sang is doing what he seems to do, even when he is healthy. He hits a wall kind of a bit as well. So I don't know. I don't know where that guy is. I was hoping they would get another starter at the deadline as well. Outside of bolstering the bullpen, they went a different way to try and shorten the game. And for the most part, it's not working because they just don't have leads or they're blowing those leads kind of later in games. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is here. Like I said, hopefully on the pitching side, a couple of these young guys that come up can, stick at least for the short term, have some confidence, make some good starts for them, give some length if they can. But even, that's something else. It's a whole nother discussion that you don't have confidence in just the way pitchers develop. But, I don't know.
Yeah. And also it feels like every game there's like one blow up inning, I remember that first game in San Diego, it was the 5th inning where they gave up 5 runs. Brazoban didn't cover first base. And then the next day, it was another big blow-up inning against Jose Buto. And then, against the Giants, that series finale, I remember they had a huge inning. It was against Cleveland, it was the 5-run inning against Mania. Against Milwaukee, there were multiple crooked numbers they put up. The Braves scored 4 in an inning against Holmes on Tuesday. It was on Tuesday night, and then Wednesday night. That 9-run inning was embarrassing. Really, five walks in an inning. It really a majority of this early on. Yeah, obviously, I understand why people were concerned about the lineup. I think the lineup is talented enough where I'm less concerned about them. I think that those are all guys who've had success in the past and have proven themselves. They're successful big league hitters. The pitching staff has a lot of heavy lifting to do. And I'm not even asking for them to each go 6-7 innings every time out or to all pitch like prime Randy Johnson, but just they need to figure out how to pitch deeper into games. And if you're giving up runs, at least try to keep the team in the game instead of letting every inning you give up a run, it turns into a crooked number.
Yeah, and I just, like you said, I don't know how you prevent that at this point. I don't have like the confidence that they have anyone to get enough outs. And at this point, like you said, you're not asking for 6 or 7 innings, even 5 or 6, though. This bullpen at this point is used too much as it is. So I don't know. It really is. It's something that it worked last year. You had Mania, you had Severino, and everything worked. You got a lot of length out of these guys. There were times in just games in general. You talk about getting blown out in certain games. I'm thinking just even back, they lost big games down the stretch in San Diego and Arizona. Diaz had a couple of meltdowns, but they were able to still right the ship, right? And ultimately, I think it was Lindor kind of playing out of his head that did that and maybe gave him that confidence. But it doesn't seem that way right now. And you don't want to use chemistry, whatever. You don't want to go too much into it because I agree that this lineup is talented and at any given moment they could all heat up and carry the team. But if their pitching staff isn't going to be able to keep them in games, then it doesn't really matter. But it does seem like, obviously last year, a lot of things clicked, a lot of things gelled. It feels like right now during this tough time that for whatever reason that they don't have that same kind of chemistry.
Yeah. And also really, this thing is last year, a lot of things I thought, obviously last year, I think was a great team.
Yeah.
And you were talking about those tough losses. They lost 2 tough games in Philly, I remember, in September, and they bounced back by winning 6 of 7 on their next homestand, including 3 of 4 against the Phillies. But last year there were a lot of games where everything broke their way. And right now, for most of the last 2 months, it's been the exact opposite. A lot of those freak plays, like, heck, I'll even point to the beginning of that game against Cleveland where Gavin Williams almost threw a no-hitter, where Lindor scorches one right back at him and somehow it stays right in front of them and it's an out. Like, they've hit into a lot of bad luck too. Obviously, you don't just lose 13 to 15 because you're obviously a lot of it is all right. You're not playing particularly well, but they've also run into a lot of weird things like that. So I feel like at some point it does have to even out. But I don't know. It has to happen sooner than later. Like I said, I mean, Philly is 9-4 this month, and the Mets are 2-10. So it's not like the Phillies have lit the world on fire on their current road trip. They've lost 3 in a row. It's just the Mets have not done really anything with those opportunities to make up ground.
Yeah. And, you talk about a team, you talk about the Phillies, talk about a team like Milwaukee. The Mets just played and they're going to play again. They're just on the exact opposite kind of run right now. They're just like a rocket ship.
12 straight wins.
It feels like that after that Alonso home run, I don't know if it helped them long term or whatever. They got rid of Devin Williams, and maybe they have something to prove, but they just feel like they're going the exact opposite direction of the Mets right now.
Those 3 games made me like, especially I'm talking about the first game and the last game of that series made it feel like the Brewers are the team of destiny. The way they, you throw Marte out at home to end one game, get a walk-off home run against Edwin Diaz in the last game. They've had 2 11-plus game winning streaks in a span of 6 weeks. That's just something you can't. I believe I saw the stat there: 51-16 since May 25th. If you look at the teams that were leading the divisions back when the Mets started struggling, I believe all 3 division leaders have changed. The Phillies now lead the East. The Brewers have a commanding lead in the Central, and the Padres now lead the West. So the National League's seen a lot of turmoil. It might be one of those years where as long as you get your hand to the wall, as long as you get into the big dance, you have a shot. Now, at this point, it's can you find a way to get to the dance?
Yeah, obviously the Mets were the hottest team into the playoffs last year, and we see with this new playoff format that the teams that are hottest into September and into those playoffs seem to make the runs. It feels like right now, they're just fighting for their playoff life, fighting for a postseason life. Much different punch than they were going through last year. Last year was more, it felt like a rocky fight. They were never out of it, and they kept fighting back. But right now, it just feels like survival, and Mr. T is beating up on them pretty good, like it's the first fight. So
I will say, obviously this team didn't win it all, but the 2022 Phillies sort of were tripping and falling into October. Yeah. I remember they basically got in because the Brewers lost 3 of 4 to the Marlins at home the last weekend of the year. But they made a run to the World Series. So I'm not saying it's impossible, but there has to be some type of spark, and maybe Noel McLean is the person to help jumpstart it. He's had a great year in the minors, and it's his first year focusing solely on pitching. So if there's one thing to look forward to, I think McLean can probably have a solid impact. I'm not saying he's going to be prime Jacob deGrom right away, but he can be. I think he's definitely a step up from what they have right now. And then I think once they come to the realization that Holmes should probably move to the bullpen where he's more effective, you'll probably see Sproat come up, and Sproat's been much better lately too. So I think there are some reasons to believe they can improve right now.
Yeah, hopefully, right? Hopefully, catch some lightning in a bottle. String at this point, just try and win series. Play it like that, and you should be pretty good. But now you just got to watch out for these big bad Cincinnati Reds breathing down their necks. But we'll obviously kind of wrap it up here. We'll keep updated next week with you. Hopefully, the Mets have a little more wins between now and then. But as always, everybody, let's go Mets.